All right, so we've seen two of the basic primitive types, the fundamental building blocks in JavaScript. We've seen number and Boolean. Now we're going to focus on string or strings. Strings are really commonly used, as are numbers and Booleans. Those three are probably the most important to understand right now. And a string is basically textual information, a string of characters. So they're just another primitive type, and they represent text. And the first thing you need to know is that they must be wrapped in quotes. This is how we indicate to JavaScript that we're working with a string. So we've seen already that you can't just go around typing random letters unless you happen to type something that actually makes sense to JavaScript, like true, which is a Boolean. But if I wanted to have a string, I want text, and I want to store it in a variable. For example, somebody's name. Let username equal. I need quotes. So if I don't have those quotes, I'm going to get an error if I have, Danny or something like that. But if I use quotes, that is a string. So now I have a username variable set to a string. We look at username. There we go. We have Danny. So we can use double quotes, and you can also use single quotes. It's totally up to you on what you prefer. There are certain situations where one makes sense over the other, but what's important is that you just remain consistent. So in a single JavaScript file, you shouldn't be switching from double to single just for your basic strings. You should remain consistent. So I'll show another example. Let fave animal equal, let's do single quotes, Dumbo octopus. And we can have spaces in there. We can have all these different characters we might want, right? I can put a $sign in there. I can do any of that. It's a bit odd, but I can. I can have numbers. So I can make a string that's just the number 23. But this is a string. It is not the same as typing 23, the number. Okay? So here's single quotes. The most important thing to recognize is that you cannot mix them up. So I can't do a single quote, hello, and then a double quote to end it. That causes a syntax error because JavaScript is looking for this closing single quote. It's just waiting and waiting and waiting. It's basically the same thing as if I had done this and never added that closing quote. We get that same error. So single quotes or double quotes, totally up to you. Strings are strings of textual information. Super useful. There's so much textual data that we might need to work with in a browser. Things like username and address and state and city, so many different pieces of information. Messages you might want to send, chat messages. There's just a lot. So we're going to spend more time on strings because there's actually more than what we've covered. There's more to them than numbers, for example. Strings have some nice little features. We're going to talk about things called methods. But just to recap this video, strings are another primitive type. They are textual information. They can be a single character long. They can actually be 0 characters long. This is an empty string. So it is technically a string. It just has nothing in it. And then they can be very long. We can have long strings. You can store them in a variable. We can use single quotes or double quotes, but don't mix them up. The only time you would ever want to mix them together is if you needed to use one of them inside of the other. For example, we could do something like, I told her go away. If I want quotation marks in my string, this is problematic because that double quote is closing the quote. So instead, I would do single quotes, go away, like that. And that's perfectly valid. So that's common. Or the other way around, she said, I hate you. I don't know why. I guess this is a fight we're having. I told her go away. She said, I hate you. So here I'm doing single quotes on the outside, double quotes on the inside. So that is a situation where you would mix them, but you should never have a single quote close with a double quote or vice versa. Okay.